Okay, we do that. We give things a moment to get going there. Hope everyone's doing all right and had a good collegiate season. I know I'm doing this a little bit earlier than usual, but I'm still outside of that primary 8 to 10 block that we try to avoid. Usually I go after. This time we went before. Hey Blah, how you doing? So we have here the final power rankings for the season, the semester, the spring, the academic year, however you want to consider it. And we did finish pretty much exactly how I expected with these two on the top, specifically with these three on the top in order. We did have some interesting mix-ups, probably down in the pit here that, went ways that people might not have guessed. We saw Boise got their win over UTD. We saw ASU fought strong against Fisher, but then couldn't handle Northwood and finishes their season 0-2. They, I don't think, competed in any leagues, tournaments, anything except NECC. So 0-2. I'm putting a team that was 0-2 for the entire semester as 12 on our power rankings. Yeah, that's happening. These teams kind of, underperformed a little bit, perhaps expectations, not massively, but a little bit for what they were expected to. And then I would say these guys haven't really played since the last time we did power rankings. Their season ended early. These guys all sort of punched their tickets at the Kentucky and Mizzou lands and haven't really done anything too exciting since then. Didn't get a ton of interplay with some of these guys who did play with each other. But the other exciting thing that happened is UC Santa Cruz is back into my top 20 at least. They are taking advantage of that Doomfist comp. We saw a couple really interesting Doomfist teams here. A couple interesting Doomfist teams this semester. Santa Cruz very successful at the end of the season with a 4-0 over both Illinois Wesley, and over Southern New Hampshire. And both of these teams made it to the CECC LAN event, which is the highest level competition we had this semester since we didn't get ABC this semester. So that is what we've got in terms of finals, nationals, whatever you want to call it this year. That's all. That's what happened. That's all we've got. So that's what we are looking at. That said, they did come out of their bracket or into the playoff bracket with the 3 seed, and I think they were a little bit of an inconsistent team. I think they are one of the teams just like Texas A&M's second team, which was, strong Doomfist team. If you don't know how to handle Doomfist, they're going to roll you. If you do, they might get hard shut down. They did not get hard shut down against that level of competition. If they'd gone higher, would they have? We don't know. They didn't go higher. They stumbled earlier in the season. So this is my overall rankings. Now let's go into, rather than sort of go through these one by one from here, I think I highlighted the most interesting things already. We'll jump over to the major tournaments that happened to wrap up this season. And the biggest one was the ECC or the Commissioner's Cup here, which I'll try to make a little bit bigger. We can see our participant list, pretty good. ISU, ASU, Fisher, UTD, Maryville, Irvine. I believe we had 9 of the top 10 collegiate schools in this LAN event. So this is as good as it gets in terms of being nationals this semester. We didn't have ABC. This is nationals as far as I'm concerned. We scroll through here. We had the group stage, our group alpha, which was the 4 teams that won their regional direct CCC qualifier. You're seeing only 3 teams here, and that is because Winthrop, who would generally be considered the number 2 team, did drop out. They did drop out. They had a death of someone close to the team, as I understand it, right before, and then they, very close to one of the members of the team, and then they decided not to participate in this. I am still, even though they dropped out of nationals, giving them the number 2 spot on my power rankings based on their performance in the rest of the season and their performance, including in, the end of the season, in other tournaments that happened right before this one, that have happened in the last couple weeks. Hey, Frisco. You misplaced Northeastern and Siena Heights. It's okay. Their icons are similar. That must be it, Frisco. It must be that I need to swap Northeastern and Siena Heights. It must be that they're both, like the doggos there. They got to flip them. That must be it. Okay. Um. So we'll start with CCC because that's the most interesting. In groups, again, most interesting thing in this group alpha here, this primary group, this direct qualified group, is that Winthrop dropped out, which meant the number 2 team in Collegiate actually ended up not being there. So I guess 8 of the top 10 teams weren't there. But we all went in expecting them to be there. They pulled out very last minute. Then we have, of the groups that don't directly get in, all of the teams in this group passed through to the bracket. We had our 4 groups for teams that got in. These teams got in through last chance qualifier. They got in through winning various things. NJCAAE, that's a junior college league. MAEC, MAC conference, PEC conference, Peach Belt conference. These are some things that you might recognize from more traditional sports that are conferences that have bids for the esports thing, as well as some more esports stuff like Playfly. Playfly was the one that split with NACE, I believe, beginning of this year. Playfly had a bid there. NECC had a bid there. We had 2 last chance qualifier bids, and then we had a Texas qualifier bid. So these 3, really 4, plus these 3 were all sort of NECC bids, and the others came from other people, other leagues that partnered qualifiers, as we can see here. And then they seeded those to make these groups. We had these groups happen. Interesting things in the group we talked about. We had a dropout here, so Winthrop didn't end up making it. Northwood, Boise, UTD, and Syracuse. UTD was definitely seeded ahead of Boise. Boise did not play any matches in any leagues anyone cares about this semester, and they didn't really play in important leagues last semester either, but they showed up and did it here. They may have not played very many matches I cared about, but they showed up here. They beat UTD. UTD is a ranked team and not like a bubble ranked team. So that's a legit win. That's good. They've earned their spot. Even if you don't compete in much, if you show up and then do it and then win, I got no hate for you. You got it done when it counted. Then we move over to Syracuse. Syracuse, full tier below some of the other teams here. Same with Sacramento. Sorry, guys. We over here in Group C had Irvine, Cumberland, and Wesley. Cumberland got the Playfly spot. It was either going to be them or Utah, and Utah struggled more than expected, we'll say, for that, or didn't live up to some of the previous hype they got for beating Northwood earlier in the semester. Whichever way you want to look at that. Came through here, did what they were supposed to. Hey, we're pretty happy with that. And we can see they just took care of things in their bracket other than the match against Irvine, which they played close, but they didn't quite make it. Playing Irvine close is a good thing. Cumberland was effectively new beginning of last semester to being a relevant team in Overwatch esports, that they're now hanging out and, getting very close to UC Irvine, who is, ancient in collegiate Overwatch, has had a varsity Overwatch program forever. It was one of the first, was in Southern California, where they could sort of, have that pipeline from the Overwatch League and the Overwatch studios and stuff like that. Like, it's a really good thing to, in your first year, be getting that close to taking down Irvine, as well as some of the other wins that they got here. Group D, it's hard for me to look at Group D. I don't. Gross. Bryant Stratton and St. Clair happened here. These two played close, as we can see here. Very close match, 3-2. Goes the way of Bryant Stratton. We would have then expected Northeastern to beat Southern New Hampshire University. Southern New Hampshire University absolutely is a real team, a reasonable team. We just would have expected, or at least I would have expected, that to go Northeastern's way, and I don't think I was alone there. But hey, regardless of how those things went in scrims and matches, Southern New Hampshire got it. So good on you guys, Southern New Hampshire. They got the win there. Then we go into the actual playoff bracket. This one's maybe a little bit disappointing. Again, no Winthrop here makes this a little bit disappointing. And then the bracket itself is single elimination. In some ways that sucks, but it's probably actually okay given how seeded this was. It was seeded by having a group stage. It was seeded by seeding into the groups. It was seeded coming out of the groups into this stuff. Like, there's enough qualifiers to get this bracket pretty right, then single elimination doesn't feel so bad. That said, I would have liked to see way more of these matches streamed, even on second or third streams. They weren't, so if you weren't at the event, I was at the event, but if you weren't at the event, it was very hard to follow, wait, what's happening in matches. If you're at the event, you just go peek over someone's shoulder and you go, oh yeah, nice shot. Anyway, they need to improve that for the future. Like, get a second stream going, even without casters, even just a clean stream. Please give us something. But in terms of in our bracket here, we do see Cumberland also held it very close against Brian Stratton. So holding it close against Brian Stratton, holding it close against Irvine. If they could have made either of those a win, fantastic, and I'd be thrilled to put them a little higher. I think they're very real here, and you guys can see where I've put them. This is their first academic year, and I have them firmly in the top 10 in the number 9 spot. They did trade this season. They, I believe, beat Siena Heights, then lost to Siena Heights, then beat Siena Heights. I could be misremembering that, but these guys definitely traded this season, but they're getting so close on some of these other ones. They're so close to that. They're already firmly in my core collegiate, though, and they very much belong here. This is solid. And the core, I wouldn't say that all semester there's been a meaningful tier gap between core and lower core. I do think at this point in the semester, at the end, we're looking at a pretty meaningful tier gap between the core and lower. Not like huge, but a tier gap like we have a tier gap between lower and rear guard or upper and core. And it's not like the upper core is huge either. We saw this was also a 3-2 when these two went at each other. So, you know, I'm saying tier break, but still not crazy huge tier breaks. All I'm saying is Alvania beat Miami and Maryland. Yeah, that's cool. I've got you here. I right here. Oh, you want me to move them up? Sure. There you go. Happy. I moved you up ahead of Miami and Maryland. Do I have Miami here? Where is Miami, Ohio? There's Miami. Yeah, there we go. That's fine. I didn't think Maryland was very impressive this semester. I know beginning of last semester, Maryland made a splash by beating like Fisher's second team, maybe second and third team or something. We went up against them in the qualifiers, and you guys were better than them. We played you in the qualifiers for CECC as well. We played Alvernia and Maryland, and Maryland was just like I was expecting more from Maryland there. I think they may have tuned out a little bit once they realized the level of competition, or maybe they started strong last semester and then petered out. I don't know. They were a little bit of a disappointment. You guys, I would have, even if you guys didn't play each other, I would have eyeball tested. Yeah, you guys are better than them. Hey, you Toad. Thanos. There you go. There you go, Woods. Okay, so we were jumping over here. Yeah, ISU was always going to win all the way through this if Winthrop wasn't here. If Winthrop was here, I still think there was a good 80 to 90% chance that ISU was going to win through it. Winthrop did this semester beat ISU once, and I think last semester they beat ISU once as well, but 3 out of 4 times ISU has been winning that matchup, and when it counts, when the chips are down, I expect ISU to win that matchup. That said, for those who don't know, that matchup is never going to be happening again because the ISU players, that varsity program is over. ISU played their last match. In fact, they played their last match sort of right here in Illinois State University versus Northwood Blue. This was the Division I finals for NECC. This was the last match that happened. It happened this weekend. This was the end of the collegiate season as far as I'm concerned, and it was a 2-0. How were the finals a 2-0, you ask me? Why were they not a 4-0? Why were they not a best of 7? Why were they not whatever? That's a good question. Apparently they ran out of time at the venue. That's terrible. That's awful. But Northwood wasn't going to win that match. Northwood was playing well, but ISU doesn't lose. And if ISU does lose, things would be getting pretty Mickey Mousey. Just saying. Anyway, this was the final match of the season. We see nothing too crazy here. We obviously had Northwood and Bryant Stratton. Those two had to play each other because 2 and 3 seed. Northwood won that handily. And then we see a case of ISU 2-0s Northwood to end that one. But anyways, this is the end of ISU's program. They're not supporting a varsity Overwatch program going forward. They've pivoted away from that direction, so their players are going to have to find new homes. But this is the end of the dominant ISU triple crown, quadruple crown, everything that they've sort of done for the last couple years there. This is going to be the end of that for esports. But they ended it with some good wins here. Rest of this bracket, nothing too interesting. Maryville, this again in my mind becomes the finals match because both ISU and Winthrop will tell you that Maryville was the third best school team, whatever. That's perfectly fine. Um, That's sorry, what I was saying there. We tried to make that happen. We got that all set. We saw that match happen, and ISU won that. I think Fisher was always going to be softer than Maryville. ISU won that. The surprising thing here, really, on this side of the bracket, is actually more that we saw Fisher beat Northwood. Northwood had problems earlier in the semester, beginning of the semester, maybe it was even last semester. They just, looks like they were just completely phoning it in against ISU or Winthrop or maybe both of them. That's too far back for me to truly remember, and I'm not going to go check. But at the end of the semester, and then middle of the semester, they dropped a match to Utah, couldn't turn it on enough to beat Utah. That's how Utah sort of firmly got themselves ranked in the top 20. But they have been good at the end of the semester. They got good wins. You see, if we go up to groups, that they were able to, they were able to dominate their group, admittedly, with Boise and UTD, not the same level of competition. They did beat Fisher elsewhere, and I'll show you that in just a moment, but then they lost to Fisher here. I do think between making it through the NECC bracket here, as we can see Northwood got through this bracket, got through. Obviously, Winthrop, we are familiar with that dropout effectively. Winthrop, I believe forfeited out here, may have not had their players. I don't care. This isn't a real win. I know that much. This would have been while they had players away at LAN, prepping for or competing in OWCS. We're not going to worry about this too much, but we do see. Do I have a Northwood Fisher match? I thought I had a Northwood Fisher match. I have Fisher losing to Irvine, and then I have Northwood beating Irvine. Fine, works for me. And then I have Irvine beating Fisher again. Still works for me. And I also have in Playfly here, and this happened literally at the same event as CCC Texas. This happened at the same thing. We have in our bracket Northwood 3-1ing Fisher. So these teams definitely have some ability to go back and forth, and we saw Irvine has some ability to beat Fisher. We've also seen Bryant Stratton has had some back and forth with Fisher. I believe more wins against them than losses this semester. But we have seen, I think, even though the most recent loss goes to Northwood losing to Fisher, I am still putting Northwood above Fisher based on the totality there. Yes, Northwood has the most recent loss to Fisher, but Fisher has losses to Bryant Stratton, losses to Irvine, losses to Northwood, literally just a day or two before. I am comfortable with that with Northwood ahead of Fisher and Bryant Stratton ahead of Fisher. Again, they've also gone both ways there, but ultimately I look at that one and go, hey, I'm pretty okay with that. I can see the matches in terms of where they happened. We can look at this, and they weren't here, but we can look at our NECC, and we can again see our this going both ways, etc. I may flip this one. I may change my mind and flip this one. I'm probably going to change my mind. I am. I think that's very justifiable either way, but I am going to change my mind and flip that one. Cool. Um, and as we saw, Irvine did beat Fisher earlier. Like it's very justifiable either way to go with those. Okay, so wrapping up our bracket here for NECC Nationals effectively. We see Irvine versus St. Clair, nothing crazy there. Fisher reverses and is able to beat Irvine this time, unlike what we saw in NECC there. And Fisher also beats Northwood, which is a reversal of their previous match at Playfly. So Fisher turned on the gas for the very end there. I'm not convinced that if this match happens again, even today, even 3 days ago, I'm not. I think that match, may still go 6 out of 10 times the way of Northwood. But hey, we see. The other thing that I think is worth covering here, Converse, obviously not really worth covering here. They didn't you know, came in ahead of Blinn. We like that. They came in ahead of Blinn. Oh, how did I get you flipped? That's what I was trying to do. That's what I was trying to do. My bad. Came in ahead of Blinn. That is fine. We saw that. That was always going to be an interesting group because this is a group where there was upset potential. And that was a case of the most upsettable group was always going to, in some ways, be these two spots right here. Who's going to come in with and win it? And ultimately, Converse did get that one. Converse had that win. Fine. Blinn, did not show up in full power there. But then could Converse do anything once they got sort of out of the squishy teams, that lower core where all of the teams kind of have a major flaw? No, they could not. They went out and, no maps taken off Northwood. Still, Converse, they sort of restructured their team, put something together that made some degree of sense there. As you can see, they sort of merged Converse and Converse Gold for the end of the semester here. And this is where it put them. Okay. Then we move on because I think we're done with this. Again, number 2 team wasn't here. That was disappointing. We move on to NACE. NACE would be one of the other big third-party tournaments. I would say CCC is the main crown this semester. Then the other things you'd look to for important crowns would be Division 1 of NECC, NACE's Super Conference / total combined playoff results, and then maybe a step below that would probably be Playfly in my mind. Playfly had some okay competition, but that's sort of how I would tier these competitions right now. And we can see that ISU did win in NACE. Good on them. They had to beat Winthrop. They did beat Winthrop. That happened. Maryville was able to play Winthrop close, making their case that, hey, they're the number 3 school there. St. Clair, not able to play ISU close. That is 1v4, 2v3. Sort of. It's not actually. If memory serves, Winthrop had the 1 seed because this is the league that Winthrop got their upset against Illinois in. So, yeah, it happens. So be it. I'll then just look at NECC, even though we've already discussed it. Most of this NECC playoffs happened a fair bit earlier, happened more than a month ago. You're seeing March 31, March 28th. This sort of really happened, but then we just have the final bit of it that happened, and we can see ISU won it 2-0 against Northwood. Northwood was able to crush Bobcats there. So that was that, which I'll then go to Playfly before returning to Division 2 of NECC, which I think is the last thing worth looking at. So we look at Playfly here. Again, this was, Playfly and they split, I believe, beginning of this academic year, and that happened. That is what it is, but we can see sort of our brackets here. We could do group view if we wanted. I think brackets easy enough to read. And the things that were expected here was, hey, Fisher's going to win out, and then Fisher's going to win out their group. Northwood's going to win out their group, we'll call that. So these two went about as expected, and then Northwood won, and that was a predictable outcome. I would have leaned Northwood in that matchup. More consistent, looked good at the end of, for longer at the end of the semester here. Again, we saw in CCC that did eventually go the other way. And then we expected this match to happen between Cumberland and Utah, and I think smart money was on Cumberland to win it because Utah's only proving good win this semester really this academic year against a top 15 team is against Northwood, but Northwood's a very good win. That's a number 4, number 5 type team there, so that's really good. On the other hand, Northwood also has a reputation for fooling around sometimes and not getting serious until they're down, and then they couldn't quite pull it back, but you have a little bit of, we really, really would have liked to see some other win from Utah against a St. Clair, an Irvine, a Cumberland, a Siena Heights, a Converse, something that would have been okay, the Northwood was wasn't just a mirage sort of thing. And instead, we got the opposite. We got a loss to Fisher Navy. And Fisher Navy is Fisher's second team. They're fine. I would put them in the pit. You can see this Atlas, Talisman, Avani, Palette, Abs, Unread. They'd be high in the pit. Maybe they'd make the rear guard. And, rear guard could put them very low in top 20 there, like, 1920 sort of thing. They they are not a top 12 team, for example, which is what you would have to be if you're a team that can beat Northwood. Now, maybe there's extenuating circumstances. Maybe something happened to Utah. We certainly know something happened to. We certainly know something happened to Winthrop and players on Winthrop, and maybe there was something similar or that same event impacted Utah in some way. We don't know. We don't know what happened, etc. But based on these results and based on Utah's lack of results elsewhere, this is disappointing, unfortunately. We were looking for not a case of, oh shoot, dropped to Fisher Navy. Oh, you can't say it. You dropped to Fisher Navy here in a 3-0. And then you won it back against Fisher Navy, but you could only win it back in a 3-2. So they lost to Fisher Navy and then won the rematch to make it to the third, fourth match. But that, you shouldn't be losing to Fisher Navy if you can beat Northwood. And Utah doesn't have the chops recently. If we go back years, they do. If we go back years, Utah was one of the first teams to sneak in a major win by beating your top two teams were Harrisburg and Maryville in the old days, and then you would have Utah and Irvine as the teams that could, threaten them, challenge them, maybe sneak in a win. And Utah, I believe, did sneak in like a championship win against one of them there. But that's years ago. It's a different team really that we're talking about. So, and they've lulled for years between then and now. Regardless, good semester for Utah. Utah back on the map. Utah someone to pay attention to in a real way, which hasn't been true for, before this academic year, hadn't been true for a couple of years, other than the occasional, that's interesting sort of thing, like, oh, they beat UTD a few years ago. That was interesting. Northwood win is a bigger deal than that, and we do want to see, was this the blip? Or was this the blip? We want more. I think, top 20 for sure was real for them this season. For sure was real for them this season. A 25 team is not beating Northwood no matter what, unless Northwood is hard running subs. But we do want to see, is this more like a top 8 or a top 16 sort of deal? Cool. And then, thank you for pulling Boise up instead of dropping us. Yeah, no problem. I mean, I wasn't going to tank you guys over that. Boise, I wouldn't make sense to tank you over that. Like, you're still in lower core there, Craig, and that's because you'd earned lower core, and Boise we just had no data on, and as soon as Boise goes, hey, we won a match against a ranked team, that just tells us where Boise belongs. Boise's a little bit of a thing. If an absolute no-name school came out of nowhere and beat you, we'd be looking at you suspiciously, but as much as I gripe, and deservedly so, about Boise didn't compete in anything other than this all academic year, they do have, as recently as last year, good reputation sort of thing. This was the right way to do it. I think what might be more controversial, maybe, is I put Boise ahead of ASU. These two were always going to be at the top of this lower core group based on how the results went. But Boise... ASU played Fisher close, lost 3-2, and then lost to Northwood, but they played Fisher close, whereas Boise got a win over UTD. Which of those is better? ASU didn't play in anything else this semester. Boise didn't play in anything else really all academic year. Both of those are a little bit suspect for my 11 and 12 teams, but the team that actually got a win is going to go ahead. Even if it was against a worse opponent, the team that actually got a win against a ranked opponent is going to go ahead in my book. Okay. And with that, I think we go over to Division 2. I think that's the only thing. Well, I'll briefly discuss Division 3. Congratulations. Alvernia won Division 3 of NECC. Cool. Your reward for winning Division 3 is I've put you in the pit, and I expect you'll be in Division 2 next semester. Okay. Then we move over to this, which this was the last interesting thing that sort of happened in my mind. Um, happened after CECC, happened before the Division One finals, but happened pretty close to the end. You can see finished on May 9th, finished on May 8th, so finished on May 9th here. And you can see the way that this worked is SNU, Southern New Hampshire University, came in with the 2 seed. Illinois Wesley came in with the 1 seed. So that means that they would have been the champions of their respective divisions. I suspect we had 2 different regions of Division 2. Maybe I'm misremembering. In the previous semester, we had 2 separate regions for each division. My guess is that they won their respective divisions. So you would have expected one of them to win. And we went through, and I remember this match happened before CECC because it factored into the CECC group seeding. Illinois Wesley 3-1 Southern New Hampshire University. And that's the result I would have expected, having scrimmed both teams there. I do think Illinois Wesley may have had some ups and downs, may have had some inconsistency, but I do remember them punching a bit harder than Southern New Hampshire punched. So, hey, that makes sense to me. No problem. Cool. But then we see our grand finals is UC Santa Cruz versus Illinois Wesley. It's a 6-0, and UC Santa Cruz came in with the 6th seed. Now, if they came in with the 6th seed, what that actually tells us is that they were the 3 seed from the same division that SNU came in from. So that would have been what? SNU and Shikigami University, which is ISU's academy team, and were both ranked in their group, both effectively beat or finished ahead of Santa Cruz in their division to get here. So Santa Cruz got in to this joined playoff bracket here, but didn't come in with a great place. And then they lost to University of Michigan, who then forfeited out. So maybe University of Michigan should be the championship. Maybe Michigan forfeited out. I don't know what happened there. Maybe we should get some eyes on Michigan. Did their academic year end and they said we're not playing after our academic year is over? I don't know what happened. Maybe they had players on planes going home from school so they couldn't play at match time and couldn't get a reschedule. I don't know. But Santa Cruz, after going down to them, came back through here and won this. And I know what happens there, obviously. Santa Cruz is a Doomfist team. They've, of course, got Zebra, well-known Doomfist. I remember when Zebra played support for that team in the Snozzler era, Wrecking Ball era. But the thing that I would say here is this is a prime example of just like Texas A&M's club team, Doomfist team that teams just don't know how to handle. Now, could they be really, really clean at the Doomfist and have ban, ways around it and all sorts of good stuff there? Yes, they absolutely could be. That would be good. That would be cool. Bans wouldn't really have applied here, but that would be cool. They could be more polished at it. They could be the best at it. They may have, other stuff that they can play depending. But that looks to me to be what happened here. So I really would like to continue to see these guys tested against better opponents because I suspect it's just going to fall apart. On the other hand, Southern New Hampshire University and Illinois Wesley both made it to CECC, which, was the top 20, top 24 schools, missing a couple, but basically the top 20 to 24 schools in the nation, and Santa Cruz went through both of them and 4-0'd both of them. Absolutely respectable, absolutely solid. The reason I am putting them in the pit is because I think their style of play with the Doomfist thing is still messy enough that teams that know how to handle it are just going to handle it, and the teams don't have to be a certain level of good really to handle it. They just have to know how to handle it, sort of thing. But keep in mind, most of these teams don't get any scrim reps against, there's 2 dangerous teams running around that play like this effectively. Santa Cruz and Texas A&M. That said, fantastic wins over meaningful schools there. Again, both of these schools were at CCC land, so those are both fantastic wins. I like to see it, but I'm putting them in the pit because I do think they will run into some schools that, maybe Grandview or North Texas just makes them crumble, sort of thing. And we have seen that sort of thing before where, like, North Texas beat UCLA, but UCLA, or something along those lines, where it was clearly just a matchup thing. I worry that Santa Cruz is probably probably very matchup dependent right now. So that's why I have them in the pit rather than in the rear guard spot. Regardless, they still make my top 20 because we're 10 deep here, 18 deep here, so they've got the 19 spot on my list here, even if they're in the pit. But that's what I've done, and I think that's what's interesting to talk about this semester, this in the final review stream here. If anyone has anything they want to cover, get it in here now, because I'm probably going to wrap up pretty soon here. I'll give you guys just a minute to wrap up. We've got blah. Have there been games? I can't remember the last stream. I couldn't stream while I was at like CCC blah. That didn't happen. We didn't have ABC games for me to stream. I wasn't gonna stream at LAN for the Mac conference, nor was I going to stream at LAN for CCC. I could have pinged them in the Discord, but CCC didn't actually. I might have pinged Mac in the Discord, but CCC didn't stream very many of their games. They had multiple titles that were going on at CCC. It's not just Overwatch. They're the Commissioner's Cup. They do a lot of different esports. So they're trying to run a different things, but they really only ran one stream, and that means they didn't cover very many Overwatch matches. Okay. Okay. Satisfied. Sheesh, thank you for pulling Wizzy up instead of us down. Okay, that's going to do it. I'm not seeing anything else. Hope you all have a good summer. We will be back here probably towards the end of the summer to get our preseason power rankings going. But for now, enjoy the next couple months. For those of you that are out of classes and everything like that, get some good rest, stack away some cash, whatever you want to do with the time, but enjoy it, be rested, be ready to compete next semester.